Hey folks, my name is Norb, and today we're taking a look at the Kiwi Ears Astral. The Astral is a hybrid IEM that comes in at $299 in the US, and of course, the question is the Astral worth that price? I'll give you my full thoughts in this video, but if you are in a hurry, they're tune neutral, they have great instrument layering, great bass extension, articulation, and detail, and I found them to be excellent as a general purpose IEM. But the treble is a hair sharp for my ears. If that's all you need, then I have product links in the description below, which help the channel out at no cost to you, and be sure to hit the like button. But if you're sticking around for the deep dive, a few notes before I continue. This review unit was sent to me by Kiwi Ears for my opinion. They had no input into any of my conclusions. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll do my best to respond. Alright, so the packaging with these is pretty minimal. You get the Astral IEMs, a case, the cable with a swappable connector, a 3.5mm and 4.4 balance jack in case you decide you need that, plus small, medium, and large silicone tips, and of course, some extra grills. The case is nothing special. I kind of wish it was leather or something that felt like it. To me, this is a big thing because the way that it feels in my hand is important. For example, I have the Meze Alba here, and it comes in at about half the price. The case on it feels premium to the hand, where the Astral feels less so. Minor point, but tactility is important to me. One thing I really do like though is the cable. It's a braided cable made out of single crystal copper, and it's a 1.2 meter or 4-foot detachable cable with a classic 0.78mm 2-pin connector. Now, I love the look of it and the feel. It feels thick, but it isn't stiff, so it doesn't get tangled. The ear hooks too, they're comfortable to use. Now, looking at the IEMs themselves, these are some chunky boys. They're not small. You can see the nozzle itself is not very large. These come in at 0.34 or so millimeters. The width on it is 6 millimeters. The depth on it is where it gets really big. So the widest point we're looking at 17 millimeters or so. And of course, at the length of it itself is about 23 millimeters in itself. Now for comparison, I have here the Zero Red, and the reason I want to pull that is because of the nozzle. Take a look at those. The difference between the two of these, you can see this one is about twice the length as this one, and it does impact ear comfort for me some. These only come with 3 pairs of ear tips, small, medium, and large, but I do wish there were more included, like foam tips or something with the, well, they rolled away. Stay. Like foam tips or something with a narrower bore so you can control the amount of bass on these. I've been using the smallest tips, by the way, when it comes to sizing, and normally I use medium in one ear or small in the other, or medium in both. These do run just a smidge large, at least for me. When wearing them, I do get a really good seal, so in places like cafes, the passive isolation works very well for me. So the build itself feels great. 3D printed resin, no lines. It just looks really nice. These are just gorgeous. It's contoured to the ear, so while it definitely feels big, it isn't bad. I never found it uncomfortable. So what do these sound like? I've had these now for about a month, and that's giving me a chance to get used to them. Just so you know where I'm coming from though, I tend to prefer more acoustic music genres. My favorite genre, and something that I'll talk about some in detail here, is classical. And I listen to a lot of lo-fi. Beyond that, I do tend to listen pretty broadly, and with these, I spent a lot of time listening to pop music, which we'll get to in a bit. But overall, I tend to prefer a slightly warmer sound signature. As for equipment, I use what I have on hand. A few laptops and tablets, an Apple dongle, and an iFi GoLink and the GoLink Max, and a Cord Mojo 2. For what it's worth, the iFi itself pairs really well with these for me because it just adds a bit of warmth, so that's usually how I use these. As you can see, I keep that in the Apple dongle in the case for that reason. Mind you, the difference is slight, and I wouldn't necessarily jump to buying one of these or buying another amp if you already have one, just to get any sort of extra benefit. These sound fine with pretty much anything I plug them into. That all said, in general, I describe these as being neutrally tuned with a slight lean toward the treble, but nothing really overpowers anything else. Overall, the sound is pleasing and not particularly colored. There's good bass articulation and physical feedback with these, which I enjoy. And it's crisp and detailed with great separation. Volume-wise, these have an impedance of 23 ohms and a sensitivity of 105 decibels, so if you want to push your hearing to its limits, these will take you there, though you shouldn't do that. Consider that my warning. Please protect your hearing. Now, each IEM has 7 drivers inside. 1 dynamic driver for the bass and 6 dedicated balanced armature drivers for mids and treble. Of these, 2 mid-range drivers and 1 ultra-high frequency driver are custom tuned. The sound on these comes off as very crisp with a fast attack and great overall response. The instrument separation is impressive and something I really appreciated. Each note, each sound is well differentiated and separated. At no point did I ever feel any sort of muddiness from these. The soundstage is notably wide and deep for the price category. It's not huge, but it creates a convincing three-dimensional space that makes the instrument positioning feel effortless. From a technical perspective, the Astral measures with a total harmonic distortion below 1% across the entire 10 Hz to 22 kHz range, which is really good. But back to the response, while the attack is good, the decay is a bit, I don't want to say abrupt, but it is a bit sudden. It's not, I feel like I lose some of the realism in here, some of the resonance, at least with orchestral works and acoustic works. And so the result is that the sound can at times be a bit too analytical for my taste due to this. This is the frequency response graph that Kiwi Ears provides, and looking at this, you'd be forgiven if you think that this thing is a bass monster. It is not. It's actually really neutral with a solid bass extension and a peak at about 15 kilohertz for some of that sparkle and airiness to the sound. But the bass itself is punchy, and because it doesn't have a big roll-off in the low bass, you can get some really great rumble. Tracks that take advantage of this have been very enjoyable for me. For example, The Falling Seagull by Javier Dubois Foley. The piece is for double bass, and I'll link to it in the description because it's wonderful new music that hasn't gotten the attention it deserves, but it really shows off all of the best parts of this IEM. Moving on to the mids, I feel that that's a really impressive area with the Astral. The upper bass doesn't really overpower the low mids, so there's no muddiness to speak of. There's no soup here. The rest of the mids are strong without being too much, and this shows up in rich voices, clear instruments, and just an overall good body to what's arguably the most important part of the frequency response, since it's where most of the voices and instruments live. Moving on to the treble, here's where things get interesting. These do have a generally neutral tuning even up here, even though there is a spike in the highest treble regions. We're talking 10 to 15 kilohertz and above. That makes some of the recordings feel a bit sharp to my ears. It's not terrible, and I got used to it, but personally, I prefer something that's slightly more relaxed in this region. I understand why they do that, so it's not a terrible thing. But what this means practically, overall, is that things like snare drums and snare hits can feel uncomfortable, especially if you're someone who listens while reading or working like I do. Chill hop and lo-fi, which I love for background listening, became too distracting unless I turned the volume all the way down, and when you do that, you lose all the beautiful articulation and layering that makes these special, plus that bass that I really enjoy with lo-fi with these. Now, in some cases, like you're listening to classical pieces, for example, orchestral works, this sharpness can become less of an issue and more of a feature. The detour with treble here is excellent, and you hear things in recordings that you may have missed before, and the timbre sounded natural to me most of the time. As for vocals, this is where I had somewhat of an issue with these, again, because of this region, but whether it even showed up depended on the genre and the mix. So let's start with classical, and let me be very clear. I adore the Astral for classical. Violins and flutes and other treble instruments are resonant, they're crisp, they're detailed, they're full. Lower in the register, I could have stood a little bit more cello and bass relative to the high, but it wasn't bad. But voices and opera, those can get a little peaky for me. Not quite shouty, but just with a sharp edge to them. This is exclusively female vocals though, but it didn't happen all the time. Listening to Maria Callas singing the habanera from Carmen, for example, it's pretty much perfect, but once in a while I get this slight sense of something being a little more piercing than it should be. Men's vocals don't tend to have this. So for example, Penepati's performance of the Nessun Dorma really shows off what these can do. You get that fullness of the voice, you get the instrument layering, and you feel that timpani when it comes in. If anything, my only complaint here, and this is across the board with these, is that they're almost too crisp, and I could have stood for a bit more lingering and resonance with the notes. All this also applies to jazz and folk, by the way, though the percussion issue is a bit more prevalent where you have things like snares and cymbals. Still, mixes that focus on piano, guitar, voice, and double bass, for example, Dreamer by Love or Sway by Diana Krall, weren't affected by the sharpness at all, and for those, I thought the Astral were amazing out of the box. Pop was one that really surprised me here because I actually didn't expect these to work as well as it did for that. Check out How It's Done from the movie K-Pop Demon Hunters. I've been listening to a lot of that soundtrack, and for that, these again were excellent. The articulation, the depth, the slam of the bass, voices come out well, and with most pop mixes, I find that the highs are toned down, so the slight brightness with the Astral really works well here. There are some genres that I wasn't in love with using the Astral. First and foremost, lo-fi. I mentioned that already. The peaks were just too much without EQ. And a lot of rock and metal felt too forward for me, just too peaky. So to answer the opening question, are they worth the price? Do I recommend these? Yes, I think they are good value, but as always, for the right person. The technical performance is exceptional for the price. The bass is outstanding. The mids are beautifully separated, and there's a real detail and life to the music. Get these if you want something neutral, something that's technically extremely capable with detailed and crisp sound, or if you're going to be listening to mostly acoustic genres like jazz, classical, or folk or indie. Don't get this if you want something that is on the warmer side, or something that is just more organically resonant. That about wraps it up for this review. Thank you very much to Kiwi Ears for sending these out. And with that, take care.